Here we go with another tier list. This time we're looking at some of the common or popular finance jobs and ranking them by total compensation. Starting it off with asset management, this term is pretty general. It typically refers to someone operating on the buy side of an investing transaction, and you could be managing those assets, typically dollars, for pension funds, endowments, wealth management offices, family offices, or many other types of investors or institutions. But the general concept typically ties compensation to performance of investments. There's always some level of guaranteed or based, almost always some level of guaranteed or base salary as a part of that package. And no matter what structure asset management takes, most of these roles are coming in at average annual salaries above six figures after we're talking just a couple of years of experience here, not just entry level, but with a couple of years of experience. Asset management pretty quickly on this list is going to land at an A tier. You can earn a lot of money doing this type of job. Next up is retail banking. And I haven't given this role a lot of love as I've talked about it on this channel, and people in the comment sections haven't either. I will say I've gotten a couple of emails from folks specifically talking about how retail banking can be a great springboard into other arms of the bank that you work at, or just of developing new skills or introductory level skills into the finance career. You typically don't earn a whole lot of money doing retail banking. Maybe you're brokering loans or just opening new accounts or certificates for average everyday customers that walk into their local bank branch. There's some level of performance-based compensation tied into these roles. It's not one of the higher paying jobs in finance though. So pretty surely retail banking is going to come in at a C tier. But that leads us into one of the big two on this list, because again, we're just talking about total compensation packages. And the big two, as you'll find out later on here, are two roles that are very notorious for people who can earn a whole lot of money. Private equity is what we're talking about now. And I won't go into all the details of how a private equity career can be structured and what the total comp packages look like. There are plenty of other great videos on YouTube that talk about that. So I'm just going to draw the parallel to the movie Pretty Woman. If anyone's ever seen the popular movie Pretty Woman, there's an extremely rich man and a poor sex worker woman, and I think they fall in love. I can't actually remember how it goes, but the super rich man worked in private equity, if that tells you anything about the public perception and really how private equity careers can really go. That's an S tier. Oops, not B. That's private equity is an S tier job in terms of total comp. Now with the picture of Warren Buffett in equity research, the next job up on our list. This one can take many different forms like asset management, and not that there's as many different ways to do equity research as there are asset management as a broader term. Equity research is a more specific thing. However, there are many different forms in which a role in equity research can take. If you work for one of the bulge bracket banks, publishing stock reports, that's sort of a sell side role, but you're probably not getting paid based on actual sales of securities because normally there's Chinese walls and conflicts of interest related to equity research, people getting paid for that results of the research. But you also could be really a junior level data scrubbing person who isn't getting paid all that much. So my point is that there's a pretty wide range with equity research. It can be a very lucrative role when you start to build up a little more experience in that field. Maybe not in the 2 to 3 year experience range, but certainly after the 5 to 10 year range. It's going to be middle of the pack for this list. You could be making $120,000 a year after a few years of experience, which puts it at a B tier here. Corporate finance is next. This is maybe the role that gets made fun of the most in Hollywood films or just even online or in movies. Just think of someone working in a cubicle in a tall skyscraper, running financial reports on a certain segment of a business to try to figure out, if there's any waste going on in an operation, or potentially at a slightly higher level, if that segment is profitable or even a good decision or direction for the company to pursue. It can be a pretty exciting role in my opinion. It's usually not the highest paying unless you were to get to some of those like senior management or potentially C-level positions within a firm. And you could certainly grow into one of those roles through working through a corporate finance career. But for the purposes of this list, it's not something you can do a few years out of college and start making a lot of money, it's actually going to go as a C tier on our ranking. Compliance, the role that everyone out there thinks nobody likes. There are a handful of people who like compliance. Actually, in some instances, I've sort of appreciated the compliance department through the firm of which I'm an employee, because many of them are good people, and they're not just out there to try to get you in trouble. They're really more out there to protect the firm and to protect you from doing anything wrong in the eyes of the financial regulators. So if you have a compliance person helping you out, then at least you don't have the regulators breathing down your back. They're generally not paid all that well. Pretty common in some of those roles, maybe $60,000 to $80,000 US, depending on what state of the country you're working in, with a few years of experience, as we've been talking about. That's going to be a C tier paying role. Consulting can be really cool, even though it's actually just in the past few months, from what I've been seeing in social media, starting to get memed on. Consulting can give you a lot of opportunity. It can bring a really cool lifestyle, and you can make a lot of money doing it. I want to look back and forth a little bit on where to place this on the list, because on our tier list, because depending on what source you read online, consultants can make anywhere between $75,000 a year to $275,000 a year. And if you're working for one of the big four accounting/consulting firms, it's probably closer to the upper end of that range. So because of that, it's going to fall into the A tier for our ranking. Bond research. This isn't the most common role, but if you know anything about this channel, we talk a lot about the CFA exams, and there is a fair portion of CFA charter holders who work in fixed income research on fixed income trading and investing. So it's worth mentioning on this list. And typically, even though it doesn't sound like the sexiest job, typically it's so specific and specified, and maybe the better way to say that is the employer hiring someone to do fixed income research for them has such a specific need for that they're usually paying pretty well for it. It's just a really niche thing that there isn't a huge market of MBAs going into, which means it's generally a pretty high paying role. This is also an area that could be replaced by AI 5 years from now. So if you're watching this video while currently in undergraduate studies, maybe don't pursue fixed income research unless it's something you really, really want to be doing, or you know how your career is going to pan out. But the point is, it's a B tier for our income ranking. Hedge funds. Now this may be the most controversial answer for this video, because hedge funds, even more so than private equity and the next top tier job that we'll talk about in terms of total compensation, hedge funds get talked about even more than those sometimes in the media. However, there are just enough roles out there nowadays, and enough people have gone to work at hedge funds, that they've sort of built out. And I didn't work in hedge funds 20 years ago, so this is just my perception of the industry. Hedge funds have really started to build out their junior level analyst position, whereas that kind of didn't exist much 20 years ago, but now there are a pretty good amount of junior level analyst roles within hedge funds. And because of those lower tier roles paying a bit less, it's skewed the total comp on average that you earn working at a hedge fund. If that role didn't exist and it was only hedge fund managers, it'd be like $500,000 plus would be the only comp packages we'd be looking at. But in this case, hedge funds are just short of the big two for our list. They still get an A tier, but they're not necessarily the highest paying finance role for 2024 compared to what we're looking at today. And on that point, the next one on our list, investment banking, which is probably the most commonly talked about career shortly after undergrad in the finance space on YouTube, on social media, or just amongst students at colleges nationwide and globally, really, for a reason. People make a whole lot of money doing investment banking. And if you decide to stay in investment banking past your first 2 to 3 years, and you get past that analyst, or especially past the associate role, and you get to VP at an investment bank, which honestly, you have to put in excruciating hours and sacrifice to build your career in investment banking. But because so many people leave investment banking after starting it, if you stay in the track that you're on within the bank that you're working at, it's relatively likely that someone could get to that VP role within 5 years or something like that. And these people can just make an unbelievable amount of money in some cases, especially if you told a college junior what someone 5 years their senior is earning in the finance field doing that type of a job. So you'll hear about salaries all the time, $200,000, $300,000 base plus big bonuses for these VP level people in investment banking, it's certainly an S tier paying job for our list today. Sales is a little bit like retail banking, where you could be earning as little as $30,000 a year minimum wage, $36,000 a year US, or you could be earning $1 million a year if you were the top producing sales rep for, expensive financial derivatives on Wall Street or something like that. So it's hard to really pinpoint this one in what an average income looks like 3 years into the job for the purposes of ranking it on this list. So we'll just look at the median based on the sources that I've pulled for purposes of putting this together. And that's going to put sales in the middle of our list at a B tier paying job. It is the most variable because a sales job is probably the one that's going to have the least guaranteed income baked in to your compensation, or we could say the least base salary. But there are just too many jobs out there that even if you're not the best sales rep there is, because you've been assigned a certain territory, you're going to have a certain income baked in, and a lot of times those incomes are pretty desirable, many times over 6 figures after having 2 to 3 years of experience, and that gives us a B tier here. Next, we're talking about trading. And similarly, all the jobs can kind of be said this way, that there's a range of incomes, but trading is also along the lines of that because it can be super dependent on performance. There's no other job out there that is quite like trading in the sense that you could consistently lose your company tons of money day in and day out. Now, they're going to put risk parameters around how much money you can trade and what kind of swings you can weather throughout the day without being stopped out of your position. So the company certainly is going to hedge you as their bet. But the point is, you could go out there, get a new job in a trading role for some reason, even if you didn't have the skills to do it, and lose money for 2 months straight and then get fired. And your income would have been very minimal because of that. And then, of course, the opposite is also true. If you were a super successful trader, you could earn a lot. On average, maybe this is sort of a cop-out answer with trading. It's a high-paying role, okay? So it's a little bit north of the middle of our list, and that gives it an A tier. I don't want to say that everyone out there trading is doing as well as people working in PE or investment banking. They're not, which is why this didn't get an S tier ranking. And it's probably also slightly lower paying than the average hedge fund role a couple years out of college. It could be the most adrenaline-filled, though. So, if you're a gambler or a stunt junkie or something like that, maybe consider a job in trading. Okay, the very end of our list, the role that's most near and dear to my heart, this is what I personally do in my day job, wealth management. And wealth management is awesome because, I won't get super subjective here. From the perspective of median income of those working in this field 3 years out from their career, the industry has changed a lot over the past 20 years. 20 years ago, it was a lot more dependent on your own production and sometimes just cold calling 100 people a day and trying to get them to roll over their IRA to invest with you in some cases, or whatever other investment strategy or product you might be selling. Nowadays, because so much of that existed 20 and 30 years ago, and there's so much consolidation in the industry, meaning these financial advisors or wealth managers are turning 65 years old and retiring and passing their businesses on, selling them, or they are selling their businesses to bigger conglomerates. Newer junior financial advisors are coming into the field, and in many cases having a lot more opportunity given or assigned to them compared to if they had to do all the cold calling themselves. That generates a different breed of person, but it also means, based on what we're talking about here, that you, on average, will earn a bit more after a couple of years in this field than you would have 30 years ago. Many people 30 years ago didn't last 2 years in this field, whereas nowadays it is more likely that you would, probably more likely than not that you will. And it can pay pretty well in many cases if you land in the right role and you're doing the right things. So it's a B tier on this list. You're looking at 80, 90, maybe as much as $100,000 per year, depending on what state you're looking at, median income after 2 to 3 years of experience. And so for the tier list here, it's right in the middle. If you appreciate videos like this, please let me know in the comments down below, and I will certainly be back with more of them. If not, if you're really just here for study tips, that is helpful information too. As always, thanks for watching.